when I'm making music, I feel like everything takes care of itself.
That's Anthony Wilson, guitarist, composer, arranger, and musician's musician. Keep on listening for part 2 of his interview. 2, 3, 4. Hey, podcast people, John here. You're listening to Make Moves, episode 12, part 2, featuring the second half of my interview with Anthony Wilson. If you didn't hear the first half, I'd encourage you to go check it out, but you could also jump in here. It's really good listening. This is the very last episode of season 1, and I feel a really huge debt of gratitude to all the guests that came on the show this season. And I also feel a big debt of gratitude to all you listeners out there. I couldn't have done this without you, and it's been a real pleasure sharing this experience with you. I want to just take a minute to remember where this started. I recorded the introduction to episode 1 in my car on a borrowed microphone while parked in front of a donut shop at about 1 a.m. where I was hijacking their Wi-Fi. I had no idea what I was doing. I just really wanted to start a podcast, and I assumed that I would figure it out. And I feel like after 12 episodes, I'm finding my voice a little bit. I'm getting the hang of this. And, honestly, this show's had thousands of downloads in over 25 countries around the world. It's kind of unbelievable to me, and I'm just really glad that I got to share the experience with you. So thanks, everybody out there. This means a lot to me, and you were there for it. In this part 2 of episode 12, Anthony and I, we dig into some really revealing topics. He opened up and told me some things about his father-son relationship with his dad. We talked about coping with insecurity. I even found myself opening up more than I normally do when I was asking some questions of him. I was letting my guard down, and I was sharing some personal stuff. And at one point, we were actually struggling to put our thoughts into words, and even through the struggle, we both had a sense that we were communicating with each other. It was a really interesting experience, but don't take my word for it. Keep on listening. Check this interview out. I think you're going to dig it. I'll play some music for you about the halfway point and also a little bit more at the end. Both great cuts off of Anthony Wilson's new album, Frogtown, and I'll check in with you with some closing thoughts at the end of the episode. All right, I'm going to turn off my mic. You turn on your ears. Let's get to it.
Okay, I am ready.
All right. We've got this magic going on here. This, I guess, would be kind of a cool time to switch gears a little bit. I want to figure out more about your life and, not just how, but, why you approach things the way you do. And, so I wanted to just sort of ask a little bit, like when did music come on your radar?
Man, that would be super early in my life. I mean, I went to a school here in Los Angeles back in the 70s called the Center for Early Education. It was a private school. My mom really wanted to send me to a private school, and there was this little sort of experimental school which has gone on to become like, it's like, Beyonce and Jay-Z send their kids there now. And it's like, there's a huge capital giving campaign every year where they do this huge gala, and, it's insane. There's a lot of, this school has become for the elite of the elite in LA. And there definitely were some celebrity kids going there when I was a kid, but it was over at Melrose and La Cienega, and it was very small. There was one brick building and a couple little old apartment buildings that they had rented out, and that was my school. That's where I went to school. And so just this year I was asked to go and play at the big gala.
Oh, that's sweet.
It happened this year. And so this is my big brag, is that I got to open for Beyonce, because Beyonce was the headliner and I was the only other musical guest at this thing. So I played my 2 solo guitar pieces, and then 20 minutes later, Beyonce came on after Jamie Lee Curtis gave a presentation, and Billy Crystal and Will Ferrell. So, but this is all in a way aside to one of the women. A woman came up to me and she said, "Anthony, I can't believe you're here. I was teaching at the center when you were a little boy, and your first day at the school, all you did." And so I must have been 5 years old or 4 years old, because it was sort of preschool, And she said, the first day of school, everybody still talks about it. They had like these little cubbies where you could put your stuff, and I was super shy, and I sat in my cubby and sang to myself, "Bye Bye Miss American Pie" all day. And I just loved music since I was so little, so she told me the story, and it's not the first time I've heard the story, I guess people knew when I was a little kid that I really, really loved music. And then we had they had a really amazing little music program. So we all played little xylophones and glockenspiels and percussion instruments. And there were other kids, that I grew up with, and we all loved to kind of jam out together. And we learned, so by the time I think I was 7 years old, I already had, was taking guitar lessons with a woman who taught at the school. And I just wanted to learn how to sing songs. And we started a little band, me and my friends from the school, my friend Ryland and Matt and Ricky and Zach. We had a little band, and we played, Kiss songs, and we played Beatles songs, and we played Fleetwood Mac and Monkees songs. And so I think it was just a thing that I liked very, very early on. My mom, at home, she loved records, and she always would go out and buy records, the current day records. And so she was playing a lot of cool records, Chris Christopherson and James Taylor and all kinds of stuff. And she would play records, things that she liked. Cat Stevens. I flipped over Cat Stevens, so we went to the Troubadour, and they took me to see Cat Stevens, and I got to have my my album autographed by Cat Stevens. This is I was 6 years old or something.
Yeah, you were onto this real early.
Yeah, it's just something that I really loved. And I grew up in LA in the 70s, and I really feel like the sensibility of LA in the 70s is still the sensibility. More and more is the sensibility of my music. Whatever was encompassed and what was going on here in the 70s, I didn't hear it all when I was a little kid. But if you think about it, you had Warner Brothers records, and you had Elektra records, and so you had Joni Mitchell, and you had Ry Cooder making music, and Jim and Randy Newman, and all the people who made music for Warner Brothers. And Ricky Lee Jones came on towards the end of the 70s, and Tom Waits was making music in the 70s. Here in LA, there was and it's all all the records made at that time used jazz musicians in sort of alongside these other musicians who weren't necessarily jazz musicians. And maybe there was something during those years, from 1970, the stuff that I heard from when I was about 4 years old until I was about 10 or 12, which just literally stamped me, and it's that's kind of where I still live, those kind of same sounds and the same juxtaposition of groove. So it came on early, and then later on I became, towards end of middle school, I got really interested in straight ahead jazz, and then I became single-minded and obsessed that I was really going to learn how to play jazz. And my father was a jazz musician. He was a composer, an arranger, and a trumpet player. And he used to say, well, if you're going to get serious about music, because I don't think up until then, until I made some kind of declaration that like I wanted to learn jazz, I don't think he really took any of what I had done seriously. Like he was like, oh, that's nice, that's fine, but this is for, this is serious, and for him it really was. And so, but then I made this declaration, like I'm like 14, I'm 14. I want to know jazz now. And he's like, okay. Well, if you do, you got to realize it's serious. And to me, that's meaningful, especially now, and, going back to what people of his generation, especially my father's also African American, and, people who were born at that time and not that much after, who lived through decades of really, really harsh treatment and a harsh world, and basically gave their lives to play jazz. Like I totally appreciate and understand what he was trying to say. Like it meant everything. The music meant everything to him. It wasn't like something that you just did, and it was not something that you don't be serious about. Like, there's, and any time that he heard somebody who he didn't consider to be really serious or really be making it, he called them out, not necessarily to their face, but if we listened to records or we listened to the radio or if we went to a performance and he heard somebody who he didn't think was making it, he always let me know that's not what you want to be doing, and luckily he saw like, okay, my son is getting really, really serious about jazz, is listening to, records constantly and really wants this. So I think it became important to him to impart, you have to be quite committed, and really something has to kick in that makes you want to know everything about harmony and how it all ticks, and how this whole thing is put together. So I guess, there's those two kind of things that happened to me. There's that early, growing up in LA, growing up in kind of a very free-spirited LA, in a free-spirited school with a lot of other really just fun kids, and we got excited about music together. And then there's, growing up and becoming a teenager and becoming very motivated and serious, and those two things are probably the two real roots for me of they're still there today,
Yeah, I'm hearing you talk about the father saying, if you're going to do this, this isn't a game, and I was sort of half-assed. I wanted to play music, but my father was he still is a professional player, and but there was this moment where it was like, well, yeah, music is great and it's beautiful and we enjoy it, but it's like it's also our livelihood, and it's everything we do. It's our artistic statement, like this, and he didn't even I think he probably had some maybe slightly better circumstances, having not been an African American, in roughly the same time range. But it was kind of like, no, this is real stuff, man. Like this is life. And for me, it kind of freaked me out. Like I sort of ran the other way a little bit. Like I want to be in it, but I don't know if I'm ready to swim in that water.
Well, yeah. And when you're a kid, man, you're like, gee, okay, Dad, like, calm down, man. Like, calm down. Like, you don't have to be so dark with me about all this stuff, like, hey, I was still wanting to have fun. I'm still 15, 16, but like, he wasn't school marmy about it, but at the same time, like, I totally get that. Like, if I had somehow been like having a slightly different sensibility, I might have been going, oh God, I don't know if I'm up for this, and, to me, I was just thinking, I think about all these musicians who I know that Because I think where it really becomes, seriousness, you have to be willing to do something. I mean, we live in a time where everything's dangled in front of our face, celebrity or the thought of success or being successful at what you do or being noticed or recognized. And I don't mean this in any real dark way. Like there's a lot of musicians who I remember and encountered growing up all throughout my, development, who, sort of didn't, quote, make it. All these great people that I've seen around Los Angeles, who are just masters. And for me, it shows that making it is a much different thing than what we're told that it is. Sometimes it's a great, you'll go and there's a person who's just known for knowing every single best chord change for every song. And he is a person who's basically playing, in the clubs, every night. But that he's a master. And none of it, there's no kind of hierarchy. He's as, if somebody who had, quote, become famous and made a lot of money, like, say, Herbie Hancock would go and see this guy, he would acknowledge the mastery of that person. It's music is this kind of great equalizer, because if you are serious and you sort of surrender to all the lessons that it can teach you, then it doesn't really matter where you end up on this continuum, because it's like this, it's sort of this great life discipline, almost like a spiritual discipline. It's just something that you do. Sometimes people become great teachers and they become known for being this person that you just go to because they've got the knowledge. They're not out there plying their trade for 2,000 or 10,000 people. Maybe they never leave the country. That's not really the important thing. And maybe that's part of what my father was talking about, or your father. This is serious. No matter what happens, if you see this through, it becomes it kind of enriches your life in a very deep way. And no matter where you end up, what you end up doing, that becomes this foundation that you have and informs your life and informs your decisions, informs what you do. It's amazing to me,
Yeah, I that is, I remember, I still think about it a lot, but I mean, I get what you're saying. You can probably stratify people based on their fame or their money or the number of albums. But when you get all the guys in a room together, maybe their egos would have them line up or something. But for the most part, they're all listening and they're all trying to figure out like what's going on in the music. And it doesn't matter how famous you are at that moment. Like that seems to be something I find interesting about musicians. When they're really deep in it, none of that other stuff matters.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Well, sorry, this isn't my interview. I'm not supposed to tell you what I think. So I wanted to ask you, a little bit, a few more questions about your father. Gerald Wilson, he's was an extremely talented and famous jazz man and band leader. And I don't want to derail too much there because, people can, sort of look him up on Wikipedia and, there's other ways to gather information about him. But what I do want to talk about is, what, as far as having a luminary as a father, and, you've already alluded to how that influenced you some. But I just wanted to ask you, like, was he a big figure in your life? Did you spend a lot of time with him growing up?
Yes. Yeah. I lived with my mother and, but my dad, my family situation was sort of complicated, and so suffice to say there were two families involved, and there had been some hurt feelings, and so my dad found it it was very important to him that I was part I be part of his family life, part of his real life. So, throughout my growing up years, I spent, most weekends over at his place. And, he, during the week, my mom worked full time. So a lot of times I needed rides to things, and I did a lot of extracurricular stuff. I sang in different choirs, and I did plays, and I had my band, my high school bands and my stuff. So he would, he'd give me rides. He'd come and pick me up at school. So I was very, very close to my dad. And he took me all over the place. He'd take me to his rehearsals. He took me to concerts that he did and shows that he did. And, it was a huge part of my life, definitely.
And it sounds like you had a lot of exposure to some high caliber stuff just by being there at a young age.
Yeah. Maybe more than I've been really able to acknowledge. I mean, but I certainly, got to see him working, rehearsing his band, or performing with his band, or, little interesting scenes like, going with him over to the Union, the musician.
Oh, the Union. Yeah.
Which is like a whole, the Union in the 1970s.
Yeah.
Was like another thing. I describe it to people, because first of all, I, as a 7-year-old kid, really didn't have a lot of business going down into this basement of this room where it was just a bunch of dudes hanging out, smoking cigarettes, playing pool, talking all manner of stuff. Because my dad would take me, he'd have to go and pick up a check or something happened. He'd go to the credit union there. And there would be Tommy Tedesco or Jerome Richardson or Harold Land or John Collins, all these people hanging out because, I guess back in the day, you hung out at the Musicians Union. It was a hub of the community. Now it's not quite the same. We've got the rehearsal rooms and stuff. So you go to rehearse and there's a bit of a hang, but then everybody's got their busy lives and they sort of go. But the sense that I got of the Union, during that time, 70s and 80s, it was a real kind of, it was just a real community hub. And when musicians would get sick, they'd have these weekend kind of potluck benefits. I don't know if you ever went to any of those. They were amazing, so it'd be like, it was just crazy, and they'd have outside, people would have their dishes that they'd made. And then there would be an all day concert, and those are things that kind of stick out to me as oh, this is a different culture. This is a different thing than maybe some of my school friends have. Their parents had other things, I mean, I went to school with people whose parents were screenwriters or doctors. So everybody's got their own culture. But I was like, this is wild. Who are these people? But they were characters to me more than, but it was a cool atmosphere, maybe I still like that. I still like that sense of camaraderie and community and the hang,
Yeah. I've been to the Musicians Union a couple of times, and I remember being, I don't know, maybe 4 years old, and there was this big cement staircase and I always wondered, where does this staircase go to? What's up there? And one time I remember we went into what is like a rehearsal room. It was, I don't know, 10 a.m. on a Tuesday morning or something, and there's a whole big band in there rehearsing. And I remember thinking to myself, what do these guys just live here or something? What?
Yeah,
what do they do?
Fantastic. It's fantastic. And I mean, still some of that still hangs on, and it's great. It's like our lives have gotten more compartmentalized or something. So because that's actually the LA Musicians Union is sort of a kind of a cool mid-century modernist building. The basic building is kind of this, I don't know who designed it, I wouldn't know, but they've, that's what they do to some of these buildings when they don't really realize what they've got. So my dad, he'd go, and it was like you were in this kind of weird, like the main room where they had kind of the offices there. I have a picture of it that I can't even begin to describe, but it's something out of like only like the Coen brothers could like come back and like reconfigure something now in a movie that would like that would do justice to what I'm remembering. Just the space was big, and there were all these interesting people, and it almost seemed like a bank, and there were these kind of people doing their thing, but everything felt organic and cool. I don't know. So I still love that building. And you've got Stein on Vine across the street still. Yeah. And I mean, my dad would go in there, and my dad just he liked to go and talk to the different people, whoever was around, he liked to chat with. And, so we'd go into Stein's, let's go over to Stein's, see what's happening, see who's there. Maybe somebody's there that you haven't seen, you want to talk with. And then later on, I read that great book, Art Pepper's book, Straight Life, which he's as told to his wife, Lori, and she basically wrote it and compiled it. It's one of the great jazz autobiographies. I mean, it's probably the best one. It's just, and Art Pepper had such an insane, intense life, down to the most nefarious of stuff, and robbing pharmacies with Chet Baker, and it's a great book. It's amazing. Yeah. But in the book, I get to this point, and he says, "Man, it was really tough sometimes as a white musician going to the union, because sometimes you'd run into people who were super legit, and black musicians like Gerald Wilson or Sonny Chris, and he names like 4 guys, and my dad's in this list, and I'm reading this, and I'm remembering like what it was like when my dad went to the union. For him, he loved talking to all these guys, and then there's like this other wrinkle when you read Art Pepper's biography of like the racial aspect of it. But I don't know. I'm just bringing all this stuff up. These are all impressions and things that I've sort of come to know about that scene. All I know is that the main thing that comes away from it is that I think I remember that when I went with my dad places where he met other musicians, he was very respected.
Yeah, I kind of wanted to ask you, like, when did you start to figure out that he was something other than just your dad?
Well, it would be at like times like that. It was like, I mean, and so that's sort of what kind of Art Pepper is saying. It's like Art Pepper respected people like my dad so much. There's another little sort of other tone to it, an interesting thing to kind of trip out on when you read it, in his book. But I guess as a kid going with my dad to these various things, what I remember is I kind of felt I felt proud of my dad. And because I could see how other people sort of related to him. I mean, I'm really telling you, there's a picture that I have and a kind of memory. Like, I was glad I was with this. I was with my pop, and all these people that he was encountering and that he really liked to chat to and talk to and laugh with, all had that same kind of feeling for him, And so I didn't get the sense like that he was like the most special or the most respected, but just like, hey, when my dad goes into his world, like, people love him, and he loves them, and I think that's pretty cool. It's really cool to even remember it now, because it doesn't feel like something that I I think about a lot of the time, you know.
Yeah, I have similar memories of, I don't know, going to the NAMM show or something, and, you know, like with my dad, and he'd sit down in the piano room, and, you know, people would gather around, and it was clear to me that like something was happening here, and these are all peers, and everyone respects each other, and it was just kind of I kind of get what you're saying.
For a younger person, it's super cool. I think about my buddies now who, you know, just had kids, and you know, they're going to be bringing them to their gigs and their rehearsals. And I mean, you know, my father was friends with, you know, Snooky Young was like his oldest and best friend. And later on, you know, when I grew up, Snooky would say to me, you know, like, man, I remember you when you were this big. And it's, you know, like he's like talking like, you know, the size of like a ruler. You know, when you were like tiny, you were a little baby. They remember you. They were these adults, and they remember you as a young person, either a baby that they kind of all marveled at. And it's cool that we get to share it, you know. It's not everybody has that with their parent, and it's interesting, and there's something great about it. So
it's a simple house, just a couple minutes south of the foothills near the track, with a workshop in the back where I can concentrate on the things I make. Near the racetrack in my workshop out back. When I started then, it was easy to pretend. It came naturally, like another better me, with a perfect script flowing from his lips. So easy then, it was almost not pretend. Arcadia, let's watch the horses run. We'll climb the mountainside beneath the sun and turn the lazy Susan till we've all had some, and stumble out Arcadia one by one.
I want to know, you know, let me think of how to say this. You know, so like when I was growing up, and still to this day, I knew that, you know, when my dad was playing, he just went into some other place. Mm-hmm. You know, like he was just, music was somewhere else for him. And I think, you know, when I wanted to play as a younger guy, I think part of what I wanted to do was, I kind of wanted to get to wherever he was, to figure out what the other half of his life was like, the part that like happened when he touched the keys, you know. And I was wondering, you know, when you were coming up and starting to play, and I guess really getting serious, were you ever trying to have musical conversations with your father, or, you know, were you trying to learn something about, like, did you feel like that was a necessary pathway to sort of understand who he was, or am I alone and just kind of weird?
Oh man, that's so interesting. I mean, yeah, I mean, there's so much about my dad to me that was enigmatic that I feel like I would never. There's so many ways that I would never get to understand who he was, but I can relate to what you're saying. And I think where it happened for me was when I felt that I was beginning to get a hold of certain things musically. I mean, my father was I was awed by my father. My father conducted a band, and I've seen them, and I know I'm not alone in this. Any people that listen to your podcast who actually might have followed my dad over the years will bear this out, that there was something extremely powerful about what he did on the bandstand. It was almost like this kind of dance, trance, very, very physical thing. And I never, ever saw any person do that with a big band ever in my life, like the way that he did it. So there was a kind of a presence that he had for me, that when he was doing what he did, it made him both more mysterious to me, more powerful, and more present, kind of more detailed, contrasted to when he was off the bandstand, in which he could be quite quiet, like lots of men, and he could be quite brooding, So there was, and so it was harder to get those kind of that sense of presence and detail, and so. But I never felt like when I'm going to make my music, I'm going to get to that, or I want to get to that, to understand kind of who he is or what he's doing. I felt like he sort of developed or built his own kind of structure for what he did, that was very unique. But as I got good at music, what I wanted to do was kind of say, like, I liked talking to him about music, and then when I would be working on something, either something that I was working on as a player or as a composer, showing it to him and trying to get a sense of, like, am I on the right, like, am I getting as detailed in what I want to do? Am I starting to get something? Because I knew that he did possess some secret to doing it that I wanted to know. I just, what he did was, I guess, yeah, it's so much to say about it. I love that you're asking about it.
Yeah, I don't mean to pry, but I can't ask this of too many people. So
yeah, no, I mean, I guess what I'm coming to is I'm sort of thinking it through and kind of stumbling around it, and not doing my very best at expressing all of it, is that the thing, I guess it never occurred to me to, like, try to go and do that thing. But I guess in my way, checked out a lot of different angles of what he was trying to do, and that the main thing I've taken away finally at the age of, like, 48 and start to see more clearly, is that you do have to build, it's important for me to build my own unique thing, my own unique physicality in my music, and my own unique way of really being present and detailed and kind of luminous in my music. Like, I think that's what I go to hear people. I go to listen to music. I turn on records to encounter that sense of presence. And so I guess the thing, maybe now I'm trying to do it. Now I'm trying to get there. Like, oh, I see why that's so important. It's really important to go all the way with what you're doing. And I don't know if that's an eloquent or really just stumbling way of answering your question, because I'm inspired by your question, and it's just making me kind of trip out on who my dad was and what he means to me, and I haven't quite figured it out for myself. But
I think if you would have had a canned answer, it probably would have been the wrong question.
Yeah.
Well, hey, thanks for digging into that with me a little bit.
Sure. Yeah.
That's kind of personal stuff, but I appreciate it. I want to pivot a little bit. Also as you're coming up, you got a musical education.
Yes.
And I just want to. Where did you went to school for music?
Yeah, I went to a college called Bennington College in southern Vermont, kind of near Albany, New York, and they had a kind of an offbeat program. They didn't really have a jazz program, and that was one of the things that made me want to go there. There was a guy named Bill Dixon teaching there who was part of the kind of the 60s avant-garde scene in New York. He was a trumpet player and composer, had really amazing ideas about improvisation and composition. I wanted to study with him. There was a drummer named Milford Graves who was also part of that same time of music. I thought, well, I could go to like a jazz school or a conservatory and I might get the usual kind of musical education, but I'm serious about this. It'll be good if I can go and get some other perspectives and some other angles on things. And then I ended up having a really great composition teacher there named Alan Shawn. So mostly I spent my time at Bennington as a liberal arts school. So I took also lots of, literature classes and art history and all kinds of other classes. But my major was music, and I studied, mostly concentrated on composition study. And then after that, I graduated from school and I moved to New York, and that was a school for me as well, because we used to go to this place called Augie's every night, which is up on 105th and Broadway. It's now a place called Smoke, and it was just a little bar where everybody jammed every single night. It was, and that's where I first got to hear Peter Bernstein and Larry Goldings and Bill Stewart. That trio has been going since then. We're talking 1990. That's one of the great trios, and they've been playing that long together, and many other players. So New York was for me, another real part of my education, and yeah.
And as far as time on the instrument, playing guitar, because you have this sort of profile as a composer and compositional strength and arranging and orchestrating, I guess. But as a player, did you study with Ted Greene? I did. Yeah.
How
long did you do that? I studied with him for a while. I have a hard time explaining Ted to most people. I'm wondering what you thought of him.
Well, yes, I met Ted under a funny circumstance, and I was completely unaware of who he was when I met him. And we had a conversation in a guitar shop because I was playing a guitar and I was playing something on the guitar that he found interesting. And so he came up and we talked for a while, and he left. And then the folks from the shop said, they asked me what he had shown me. and this guy had walked into the store with like stringy hair in a flannel shirt, unbuttoned down. He was sloppy, and I was like, are these guys like having me on? Like, what are they talking about? Like I knew that he knew about guitar, but he could have been anybody off the street, and he didn't stay long enough to reveal anything else about himself. He just came in, he talked to some people, he didn't play any guitar. He came up to me, we had a conversation, and he left. And so they asked me what he had shown me, and I said, well, he didn't show me anything, but we were talking a bit about Freddie King, and we were talking about something else, and Joe passed, and they said, well, you know who he is, right? And I said, well, he said his name was Ted. And they said, that's Ted Greene. And I really didn't know. I was not aware of Ted Greene. And I'm so glad that I wasn't, because I got to discover who was Ted Greene, and So they had a copy of Chord Chemistry. They were like, "This is his book. Check out his book." And so I bought Chord Chemistry right there and then. And then I met Ted like 6 months later at like one of those vintage guitar shows, like at the Santa Monica Civic. I had gone there just looking around one day, and I ended up in some vendor's booth, and I was playing a guitar, and Ted came up. And by then I knew who he was and what he'd done, and I'd heard his album. By then I was like, oh God, this guy's like genius, but I hadn't thought to call him for lessons yet or anything. And that day we started to talk, and we talked quite a bit. And then that day I asked him if I could take some lessons with him. And he said, well, you don't need lessons with me. I heard you play. You don't need lessons with me. And I said, no, I really think there's some things that I'm unsure of. There's a lot of things that I have been able to figure out on my own, because to sort of get back to your question, I didn't really take many lessons, especially not for jazz. I sort of picked up things as I went along and had a few lessons here and there, and I had some books, and then I learned stuff from records, and I was really into learning people's solos and picking things out off of records. And I sort of built my own I cobbled together my own little kind of structure of knowledge of the guitar, reinforced by what I had learned about music theory and harmony on a more kind of abstract basis. And because I was learning those things, I found my own way to apply them to the guitar, but with no methodology at all. And without a lot of, sometimes without a mechanical context, or methodology is the right word. Sometimes, just a system to put something in that shows you that it's not quite as arcane as you think it is, because the guitar is everything's kind of hidden on the guitar. So if you're doing it alone, you have to trust yourself that you're going to be able to find all those hidden places. And I had actually, in my own development, kind of reached a ceiling of I felt like really hindered by the things that I didn't know. So I had looked at Ted's books, and we had this great conversation. I said, no, I think I have a lot of holes in what I'm doing, and I think that those are the kind of things you could help me with. I'd at least like to try, to come and have a lesson. So I went in over about 2-3 years, really towards the latter part of his life. I'd go every 2 months and sit with him for about 2 hours and go over all kinds of stuff, either more raw stuff based on chords and theory and voice leading, or, going from voice leading to songs and sort of starting to make, see how things really applied with songs. And he was just, and then it became life lessons, and I was really, really grateful. We were both Columbo fans, and
oh yeah.
I just loved the guy. I loved the guy, and he did really. Within the first lesson, some of the things that were really eluding me became very clear what I needed to do on the guitar, and to this day, I still go back to, just various things I learned in the first lesson with Ted. A person could probably take 1 or 2 lessons with Ted and have enough for probably the rest of their lifetime. That's how good a teacher he was, because he could see what you needed to know. And he would always say, you can do this if you want to, if you want to have no other life. But that's the thing is, like, these very specific things that he had spent so many years and hours working on, you know, if he shows you 4 of those things, you can be working on them for the next like 14 or 15 years, you know?
Yeah. And he sent me home once, you know, one of the lessons I took early on, it was sort of how to systematically work through every 4-chord voicing or 4-note voicing of like a D major 7 chord or something. He said, yeah, this will probably take you like a month.
Yeah.
Like come back in a month when you figure it out.
Yeah. And when you figure that out, then there's like a million other things that can easily, very naturally lead you to without, you know, and so that's the cool thing about those kind of things, you know, the displacement of a voice in any one of those chord voicings that you're talking about will be another month or several months of work, you know, and, you know, all you have to do is displace one of those voices an octave and you've got another world of sounds and timbre and sonority that you can explore on the guitar. So to me, it was like, oh my God, this is amazing, man. And then to put it in context with like a song, you know, oh, okay, Prelude to a Kiss, Body and Soul, whatever song you want to do, let's go through it. Okay, then let's talk about it less from a, you know, one of the things I felt like he taught me how to do was, you know, so those voicings that you're talking about, I always looked at those, you know, I had learned some of those and some of those systematic voicings, but I felt very locked into them as kind of structures. And one thing that he began to show me was how every single voice that you play in a chord has the potential to move somewhere independently of the other voices. And this became like, you know, years and years up till now, up until probably, you know, the end of my life, I'll be working on this sense of the independence of the voices in the harmonic structures that I play. And that all came from Ted. I wouldn't have even known, I wouldn't have even known where to begin. I had a sense that it was possible in writing music, in writing, but I didn't know how to do it on guitar. And then like Ted just sort of unlocked it for me. And I went, okay, this is great, you know?
Yeah. Well, you know, I never turned into much of a player, but I remember just a couple of lessons, and he gave sort of a systematic way of thinking about infinite possibilities. It was like the most efficient lesson you ever had. Like, here's how you can think about an infinite amount of ways to get something done.
Yeah.
Go home now.
That's right. That's right.
I think at some point in the future, I'm going to maybe do something on TED. So I'll circle back to you on that. I want to ask you a couple of sort of like a little more fast paced questions just about you, like, you know, like your mental makeup. If you don't mind, I'm curious, you know, musically or personally, like what feels risky to you these days?
Gosh, I mean, that's risk is opening up something, you know, what's risk? Risk musically, I mean, we're not risking much. We're not going to, you know, hopefully, you know, we're not risking our lives doing this. So the people that make real risks in the world, I guess I say this with all due respect to them, first of all, because I think there's people who take, you know, every day, go out and do things, you know, do jobs that they might not come home from, in other words. And so as a musician, risk is different. I mean, am I risking that I won't be accepted, or somebody might not like what I do, or somebody might criticize what I do? I mean, at this point, I feel like what's risky, there's no more risk, because the most important thing for me is to I think is to be seen as who I am in my music as much as I can, reveal something about myself that feels, tender or vulnerable or playful, different aspects of who I am. I guess it's the risk is the parts where I feel insecure about having that be seen. And to me, this, singing songs has been a huge thing, because when I sing, I'm opening up my voice, I'm opening up my mouth, and words are coming out of my mouth. And often these things, I'm speaking about things that for me are or were very personal, sometimes sad, or sometimes things that I might have been, afraid to talk about. So the risk is that you'll do that and people will hear it. And I guess the worst thing that really would happen is that they just laugh at you and they go, oh my God, what a joke this person is. But that never happens. I mean, I think art, I think there's no risk in, there is risk in art, but I think because, I don't know, as a person who looks at art and looks at, I go to see people's visual art or see their play. I'm open, and I'm putting myself in that same open place to learn what this other person has to say to me. And so if I'm able to do that and offer that same kind of a spirit to an artist, then I, as an artist, can offer that to you. I can just say what I have to say and put that there, and nothing's really going to happen to me. I guess you risk in being able to learn that that's a possibility. So each step along the way about making yourself a little bit more kind of, bearing parts of yourself that you're insecure about, or that feel more tender, or that I'm more protective of. There's the risk. The risk is like, if I tell you this thing that I've been protecting, are you going to laugh at me? Are you going to throw stuff at me? Are you going to throw tomatoes at me? What? But I guess what I learn as I get older is that if there's something that I do have to say or that I wish to reveal, I can trust myself to go and do that. But that's what I'd like to do. That's what I'd like to do in music. Although I'd also like to just entertain. I don't know. I mean, I think about like somebody like Louis Armstrong. Somebody posted some beautiful thing of him the other day, and it was just him, like during the intro to Hello Dolly is what I saw, also with the sound off, and this immense joy that he was able to project. I was watching it and I thought, well, this is so much more complex than just, it's not unbridled joy. This is a person who had a whole history and not an easy life. And so for him to be able to embody that incredibly entertaining sense of joy that fills me up with the same feeling, I guess that's risky. Like for him to go there and be able to embody that and get to that place, that takes so much of the artist, and even in such an entertaining package as that, in his later work, where it was just, that smile was just beaming, but there's so much behind that smile. I think it's risky to even do that. I mean, I don't know what I'm saying too. Sometimes I try to figure out, I get a little fixated on the word, but I hope you get what I'm saying. I think it mostly has to do with self-revelation and being able to, it's not only the saddest stuff or the stuff that feels most tender. Sometimes to be able to like explode into that place of joy in a performance, that's risky, like to go there. And like, that's why we respect some of these amazing entertainers who like really seem to be able to project that thing out there. That's a risk, to be so unbridled in the feeling, because everybody's got like complex lives, and maybe they're going to be like, why is this guy being so, and I think some people did feel like with Louis Armstrong, like, why is he being so happy? But like the fact that he went there shows something very deep in the man, and he risked a lot to be able to do that. So I don't know if it makes sense, but that's sort of where I'm riffing on it tonight.
Shabby bird, way up in the tree. Shabby bird, way up in the tree. I can feel your eyes on me. Stole the head right off your head. Stole the head right off your head. You chased after, I played dead.
I guess musically speaking, sort of, I'm kind of flipping this a little bit. How do you know when you've got something right?
Yeah, it feels, I know the feeling from, I try not to even worry about it too much. Hopefully there's other people there, especially if you're in a recording situation that can help make that determination. But I think I feel it most when I'm composing. And I think when I'm composing, for me, it's always it's almost like a sense of transcribing something that I'm hearing inside. So I'm like a scribe, and there's something there. And if what I'm getting down feels incomplete, it's the fault of the scribe. In other words, so I have to go back and perfect my ability to transcribe that idea, because the idea is usually always intact and in its own way, kind of, perfect or complete, however you want to describe it. So when I get that sense of like, oh, I can move on, or this feels balanced. But sometimes you don't ever have that feeling with something that you work on, or you have to really go back and you thought you had it complete, and you end up having to take away a lot of stuff. Usually it's when it's gotten to its simplest point that I feel like I got it. But I may go back a year or two or 3 or 5 later and go, oh man, I hadn't stripped away at it enough, and it really wasn't done. It's a little raw. I don't know. I think you learn to, from a practical standpoint, and maybe for people who are listening who struggle with this, trust yourself, trust when a stopping point feels natural. If you're taking a solo and you get to the end of the chorus and you kind of sense that you're done, and then you go and you play another chorus, usually by about the third or fourth bar of the next chorus, you realize that you were done at the end of that chorus. And that's a feeling to like memorize, like, oh, let me memorize that feeling that I had during the last 4 bars, for improvisers, people who are working on trying to make their solos better. How did I feel? What was I getting to at the end of that last chorus where I felt like I was wrapping things up? And then what is it that started me back on again to take another chorus when I was done with my idea? It's usually, is the idea done? Did I say what I had to say? Sometimes you don't get it. And, and then you go around in circles, or, sometimes I talk too much. But I'm, one good way to do that too is, it's almost like is to give yourself exercises where you confine yourself. So where you have to learn to write, 12 bar or 16 bar songs, or learn really to make a good statement as a player in 8 bars or 4 bars or 6 bars. As you do that, you start to be able to trust your instincts of kind of simplifying. So, but sometimes you don't know. And then you hear a piece where you just really got it and you went, oh man. Or, what happens to me a lot of times is a producer will say, like I said at the beginning, hey man, I think you got it there. And then you go, well, I don't know. I think I could do better, or I think I could get, but I'm still hearing something. Can I try another? Sometimes I like the producers who will let me take another couple passes. Then we go back and we listen to the first or the second one, the one that they said, this one just worked. And you learn over time, oh yeah, that works. That works. And you can kind of memorize that stuff. You memorize those feelings. Oh, what it feels like when you just made a good statement, and then leave it.
Do more of that.
Yeah.
I'm starting to wind down on my questions here. I have a few more. They'll get progressively easier, I think, but I want to be mindful of your time a little bit. Okay. Although I am feeling kind of greedy and enjoying this, but
we can wrap up around 10. That'll work. So.
Excellent. So I just wanted to ask you a little bit about your support network. I don't know if you're married or have kids or like what your life's like, but what is your support network all about?
God, it's
like who? And this is the way I always ask the question: who do you call when you need to talk to somebody?
Yeah, well, it's Anne Marie, my girl, and it's my mom, and I have a therapist who, sometimes I'm too busy to go see, but it's a person that I've known over years. That's been a real help to me, in a lot of, momentous personal decisions or times of trial. Other musicians, when you're on the road, you build bonds with people that you play with. So, I have a lot of text threads that go on for years, with certain people, and they may not always be the most, it's not like we're all talking about the deepest stuff, but there's just certain people that you bonded with when you played with them on the road for a while. So it's great to just, when something comes up that reminds you of that person, you send them that article or that picture, or, oh, I'm here and I remember when we had that meal together. And to me, those things are pretty meaningful. I mean, it's just amazing that we have these little computers in our, that's the side that I like of technology, that like one of the sides of technology that I like, that we've got this ability to kind of stay in touch. Sometimes we don't stay in the kind of touch we need to be with other people, but some of the people that I play with, yeah, but
what kind of, I don't know, this might be too personal, but like what kind of stuff do you encounter where like you feel like you want to reach out to other people? Like, is it just like daily life stress, or do you have meltdowns around music, or like what, I mean, we're all human. We go through stuff, but
there's just all kinds of things, so, my girlfriend, Anne Marie, she had this great idea, cause sometimes I can tend to, I tend to be hard on myself, thinking that I didn't do enough of a good job, or I don't know. I'm hard on myself in a lot of ways. And Anne Marie had this great idea of like, every now and then I'm someplace and somebody, and it's not just always random people. Sometimes these are people that I know and respect, and they say something that just shows me the regard that I'm held in by that person. And so she's encouraged me to like keep a little book of like things like when I'm unsure of myself, remember somebody else who's sure of me. And like, I don't know, there's a lot of times that I can feel really like uneasy, and so usually it's not about, music. When I'm making music, I feel like everything takes care of itself, but it's after. It's kind of in the void left behind after you make music that sometimes that's where my own foundation can tend to be a little shaky. But yeah, as I say, I've got a good therapist. My mom is an incredibly wise woman, funny woman who gets it and has a lot of great things to say. I mean, all the best people in my life who help me get through things that are tough. The main thing is the kind of the light touch and the humor that they bring to everything, and they make me laugh about it. And as soon as I'm laughing about it, I'm cool. I'm cool again. Humor is it's always the number one thing. I don't know to watch good comedy to me is a support system for me because it's the same thing. Everybody's struggling with insecurities or family stuff or how to be in relationship with other people and to kind of know that other people are struggling through this stuff is, and laugh about it helps me a lot.
Yeah. I actually, for a while I did that. I said, I just made a deal with myself. I'm not going to go to bed angry. If I'm having a rough day, I'm going to watch 10 minutes of comedy on YouTube and I'm going to crack up and then I'm going to go to bed. That's how I'm going out.
Yeah.
Well, okay. I should probably wrap it up here. I want to ask you, a couple little, is there anything that's next that people should be paying attention to if they're following your career? Albums, shows, what?
Yeah, I feel like there's not much specific. I'm trying to kind of figure out what I want to do for my next record, and that may take a little time to figure out. I've got a couple of ideas. In the meantime, I'll be booking shows again in Los Angeles and points beyond, definitely in 2017. So if people who are listening, check out my Facebook page, my website. Stuff will be listed. Right now, nothing super specific. We just finished an album with Diana Krall, so I think that'll come out in May, and I'm definitely on for some more touring with her starting in May of next year. Mm-hmm. Then around it all, I'll try to do quite a bit of my own stuff with my own bands. I might try, I have no idea. Next year, it's great. We did this album Frogtown, and I was pleased with the album, with what it achieved musically and what it achieved kind of out in the world and how it got received and how it got heard. So I've naturally let that sort of taper down, and then I just am leaving myself some space to kind of discover what comes next. I just got a beautiful old Martin guitar from the 1920s that I'm feeling really inspired by, an 018. So it just sits by my chair, and I've just been playing with that and writing a lot with that. And so maybe there's a lot of songs in that guitar. Let's see.
We can only hope. Yeah. Well, I'll make sure to provide links to your website and Facebook and all that stuff in the collateral blog post for this episode, or maybe this will be episodes. We'll have to figure that out. Cool. But in any case, I want to thank you for taking a lot of time. Thanks for taking a lot of time to talk with me and sharing your story here with the audience, our listeners.
Not a problem.
You gave it up, man. You gave us real stuff, and I appreciate you sharing so much. Man,
I love it. Love the chance to talk to you and your peeps, and to be continued.
Yeah, I hope to keep in touch with you.
Right on, John. Thank you very much.
Talk to you soon.
Cheers. Bye-bye.
All right, there you have it. Episode 12 is coming to a close. Thanks to Anthony Wilson for coming on the show. I think it was a great way to end season 1. During this episode, with Anthony's permission, we heard Arcadia and Shabby Bird off of his new album, Frogtown. You might be asking yourself, why does it sound so good? Well, Anthony wrote the tunes, and the band includes some serious musicians, including Petra Hayden, Mike Elizondo, Jim Keltner, and many more. None of that hurts. Of course it's going to sound good. Although I need to take a short break to get season 2 put together, I hope you will stay engaged by finding Make Moves on the interweb and social media. You can find us at www.makemoveswithjohn.com and also Facebook and Instagram at Make Moves with John. Thanks so much, everyone, for being out there and being loyal, dedicated listeners. I look forward to sharing more with you when season 2 comes back around. Until then, take good care of yourselves. Go out there and make moves.